All right, let's dive right in. There's a plan floating around, and frankly, it's the kind of plan that makes you want to check if you accidentally ingested a large quantity of paint chips. Erik Prince, yes, Erik Prince, former head of Blackwater, a name synonymous with things that go horrifically wrong in war zones, has a new venture. His company, 2USV, has proposed training and deploying an army. Not a small army. We're talking as many as 100,000 armed and deputized citizens. Their job, to supplement ICE's already robust capabilities in deportations. Fantastic, just what America needed. More guns, less oversight. Now, when a plan this, shall we say, is pitched, you might expect a swift, "Are you out of your mind?" from leadership. Instead, President Trump, when asked about it, offered a lukewarm, "I wouldn't be opposed to it, necessarily." Necessarily. That's the kind of ringing endorsement that fills you with confidence, isn't it? Imagine 100,000 people, potentially your overly enthusiastic neighbor who loves his Second Amendment novelty coffee mug, given a badge and a gun to round people up. What could possibly go wrong? It's like giving a toddler a bazooka and saying, "Just be careful, sweetie, let's not forget who we're talking about here." Erik Prince's previous company, Blackwater, now called Academy because rebranding fixes everything, right, was involved in the Nisour Square massacre in Iraq. At least 14 Iraqi civilians were killed. Perpetrators eventually pardoned by Trump in 2020. So the track record for accountability with Prince-led private forces isn't exactly stellar. It's more like a smoldering crater where accountability used to be. This context is not just important. It's screaming a warning at us through a bullhorn made of past mistakes. This whole proposal isn't just a minor policy tweak, it's a fundamental shift. It's outsourcing a core and incredibly sensitive government function to a privately raised armed group. A group that would operate with potentially far less training, oversight, and public accountability than even existing federal agencies, which, as we'll see, already have their own significant issues. Think of it as the gig economy, but for state-sanctioned force. Uber, but instead of a ride, they might just deport your grandma, and you probably can't even give them a one-star review. So who finds this idea alarming? Oh, just, academic experts, the people who actually study non-state armed groups and immigration. They have a term for what Prince is proposing, a pro-government militia. And let me tell you, in the world of political science, that term is not generally followed by, and everything turned out wonderfully. It's more often a prelude to a very grim chapter in a country's history. These aren't your local neighborhood watch volunteers organizing a bake sale. This is something entirely different and significantly more concerning. Why the alarm bells? Well, research into pro-government militias paints a rather bleak picture. These groups, often operating in the shadows or with a veneer of official sanction, are frequently tasked with the dirty work. Specifically, they are often the ones committing human rights violations. This isn't an accident, it's a feature. It allows governments to maintain a degree of plausible deniability. Oh, those terrible abuses. Wasn't us. It was those enthusiastic, heavily armed citizens we vaguely empowered. Our hands are clean, mostly. The connection is stark. Studies show that the deployment of pro-government militias is associated with a significant reduction in a country's respect for human rights. Think about it. You create a force that isn't bound by the same rules, isn't subject to the same oversight, and is often filled with individuals who are, shall we say, highly motivated. It's a recipe for disaster, a Molotov cocktail tossed into the already flammable structure of civil liberties. The state can essentially outsource its violence, keeping its official forces seemingly clean while achieving its less savory objectives. And these aren't just wild theories from people in ivory towers. The experts sounding this particular alarm, like Brandon Bolt and Isabel Skinner, have dedicated their careers to understanding militias, rebellion, armed conflict, and immigration. Their concern isn't academic navel-gazing, it's based on a deep understanding of historical patterns and the mechanics of state violence. When they say, a proposal like Prince's is dangerous, it's probably a good idea to listen. It's like a team of structural engineers looking at a new bridge design and collectively shouting, "That's going to collapse!" If you think this is all a bit hypothetical, let's take a quick, depressing stroll down memory lane. History is unfortunately littered with examples of pro-government militias doing precisely what experts fear, Take the Serbian Tigers, led by a man literally nicknamed Arkan, operating in Bosnia and Croatia in the 1990s. These weren't regular soldiers. They were a paramilitary unit, deeply intertwined with the Serbian state, and they became notorious for ethnic cleansing, massacres, and other war crimes. They provided the Serbian government with a deniable force to carry out its most brutal policies. Then there's Operation Condor in South America during the 1970s and 80s. This was a coordinated campaign of political repression and state terror involving right-wing dictatorships. While state security forces were involved, pro-government militias and death squads played a crucial role. They were the ones often carrying out the abductions, torture, and assassinations of political opponents. These groups allowed regimes in countries like Argentina and Chile to terrorize their populations while maintaining a facade of legality, or at least muddying the waters of responsibility for horrific human rights abuses. Consider the September 11, 1973 coup in Chile, which overthrew the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende. While the military was central, civilian paramilitary groups, often with far-right ideologies and tacit state support, participated in the subsequent repression. They helped hunt down perceived leftists and dissidents, contributing to an atmosphere of terror. These weren't just spontaneous vigilantes, they were tools, empowered by a regime that found them useful for tasks too dirty for the official record. The pattern is distressingly consistent across different continents and decades. So, when we hear about plans to create a new large armed and deputized civilian force to supplement state agencies, it's not fear-mongering to point to these historical precedents. It's called learning from the past. Specifically, learning that when states empower groups that operate outside the normal chains of command and accountability, bad things, often very, very bad things, tend to happen. It's a playbook for abuse, and it's a playbook that Erik Prince seems eager to dust off and put back into circulation right here. Now you might think, well, surely our existing institutions would prevent the worst abuses. And to that I'd say, have you the news about US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, lately? Even before we talk about adding a 100,000-strong militia into the mix, ICE has faced serious accusations. We're talking about forcibly disappearing undocumented immigrants, international students, and even permanent residents. Reports describe officers frequently wearing masks, engaging in warrantless arrests, and smashing car windows. This is the baseline, folks. It's not exactly a gold standard of transparent, rights-respecting law enforcement. And what about the attitude from the top? Former acting ICE director Tom Homan famously declared, "I don't care what judges think, let that sink in," the head of a major federal law enforcement agency, openly stating his contempt for the judicial branch, one of the supposed checks and balances in our system. This isn't just a rogue agent, this is a leadership sentiment that actively undermines the rule of law. If the existing agency tasked with deportations already has leaders expressing disdain for judges, imagine the mindset of a newly deputized private force. This is all happening in a broader context that should worry everyone. The US Polity Score, a measure of regime type, was downgraded to a 5 out of 10 as of 2020, categorizing the US as a weak democracy. And guess what tends to emerge in weak democracies where leaders are trying to navigate fragile institutions of accountability? You guessed it, informal pro-government militias. Add to this Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem incorrectly defining habeas corpus, a cornerstone of legal rights, during a congressional hearing. It suggests a fundamental misunderstanding, or perhaps disregard, for basic legal principles at the highest levels. So, what does a proposal like Erik Prince's mean for a democracy that's already showing signs of strain, and for the human rights of people within its borders? It's like pouring gasoline on a smoldering fire. When you combine a willingness to sidestep legal norms, an existing agency with a controversial record, and the idea of unleashing a massive, privately run armed force, the risks are enormous. With trust in the press at an all-time low, the ability to hold power accountable is further diminished. This isn't just about immigration policy, it's about the very fabric of democratic society and its commitment to human dignity. And frankly, that fabric is looking pretty threadbare. Please like, comment and subscribe, and thanks for watching.